Hello, everybody. Today's another day with the Matadoras, and we have a special guest today, our good friend Tiffany. And of course, I'm Dina, and we have Lizzie. And
Hello.
today we're going to be talking about a wolf in sheep's clothing, which, can encompass a lot of different scenarios. We're going to talk to Tiffany and Lizzie, who are both, potentially out there in the dating world. They may not want to be right now, but they are single. And we're going to talk about some of those situations. And then also, we want to talk about, kind of the church's role and take on singles and being out there and what they're looking for, maybe even how to direct them. Because as Lizzie and I discussed, when we were young little teenagey bop Christians, looking for love and, a future spouse, the ideology was just make sure you pray for the right person, make sure you're both Christians, make sure, that you have a list of what you want in a person. And, that's great. And it's not a bad thing in itself, but, it didn't work. It didn't work at all. We ended up with really bad people. All of us, Tiffany too. So anyway, so we just want to talk about that and just really kind of just chat and just, yeah, we're going to explore this whole topic and it could go any direction. We don't even know. So we're just going to have fun with it.
I can't help but giggle because just the whole topic, and I think both Tiffany and I know Dina has been a part of the process of us dating, but we've had some really horrible but funny moments of going, what in the heck are we doing in this dating world? And like Dina said, I think when we all started dating, because I think all three of us were raised in Christian churches. And so we were always told, make sure number one, they're a Christian. Number two, um, pray for that spouse, pray for them before you marry them. And then another one was once married, always married. And then there's nothing
Oh, and
else.
be a virgin and make sure you're a
Oh yeah,
virgin.
stay pure. Yes.
Yeah, you, not him.
And so, I can't help but giggle. And if we giggle through this, you just bear with us because, the beauty thing is, I think all three of us have healed. And so we found humor in it. But we also have a passion of not just sharing our story and not just making people aware or helping them recover from these toxicity relationships or abusive relationships, but also to educate those so they don't go the same path we do because it's so easy. If that's all you hear, you end up in that same cycle. And we want to prevent divorces. That's our goal because we do have a passion for the marriage covenant and the marriage vows. We do see the importance of that, but we want to prevent these young um, men and women of going into these dating relationships without enough tools, education, and knowledge to make the right choice. And realizing that just because a person knows the scripture, just because a person loves to worship and lift their hands and cry in prayer or whatever, and, attends church regularly does not mean that they're actually a righteous person or a person that is letting the Lord redirect them. But if that is what the church sees, then they think that that is good. So it really kind of puts the pressure on the person that is dating. And that's why I always say, educate yourself. As awkward and as uncomfortable in the topics they may come about, we need to be educated. Now, one of the things I'd like to discuss when I was dating, and I know Tiffany's got some good stories too. I was when I met my first husband, he was a Christian, he knew all the Christianese, what we call it. And then we got married, and I kept myself pure. And then I went through this hell for 14 years. And of course, then you go through that phase. Well, what did you do? We've talked about that before. But if I had learned the warning signs at an early age, I'm talking high school. I'm not talking about college or career. I'm talking high school. We may have had a better opportunity and a lot more wisdom to make a better choice. So then we don't go through just the turmoil of a divorce. We don't go through the turmoil of the church people, just trying to say that you have to be married the rest of your life to this person. Um, it's definitely I think we just need to change directions of how we're going about this. And one of the reasons why I would say that, first of all, I said about my first husband, my second husband, very passionate about God on the outside, knew all the right terms, knew all the right ways to pray, to read the Bible. And my dad, who was a very discerning man, he was a pastor at one time, really loved this person as well because they were that good, right? And then years down the road, he was leading a double life. It was a lie from day one. Well, if I had learned all of this, I was so busy focusing on avoiding my past toxic relationship that I didn't see that there was other things that make a person toxic, right? And then I got in, okay, here she goes again. And then I could talk about my recent dating where I was pretty much engaged and he was very, we even read like one of Tony Evans' books together about spiritual warfare and praying with your spouse. And we'd go to church, we were looking for a Bible study. And over time, I realized it was just a front. Abuse started to happen. That's where my financial abuse came into play, which, if you watch or listen to our financial abuse podcast, you'll know the story behind that one. And it was laughable. I mean, he had this huge spreadsheet, and just like was charging me extra money that I was already paying him monthly. And then here you are outside of the dating world, and you're going, I'm not enjoying this anymore, you know? And how do you determine what is healthy? Now, Tiffany, I would love to hear a little bit about when you were young, because you were also raised in the church, and what you were told, and then, the hurt and the pain that you had from the church, and then maybe your dating experience now.
Hi. So I started dating seriously a boyfriend at the age of 14. He was 18 years old, and met him at a summer camp. Friends introduced me. I thought, wow, he's an older boy. He knows more. He was really into me. I wasn't sure about him. And he was a Christian. We would read the Bible together. We would do Bible studies together. Um, we were staying pure from marriage. And when I turned 18, that purity went away because I was 18. And I quickly started to learn within those 8 years that he wasn't as kind or caring or very Christian like. And we began to fight a lot, and we ended up breaking up, even though we were almost to be engaged. I quickly met my second boyfriend, which became my husband, and I had told him everything that the first boyfriend did that I didn't like, and he quickly started to manipulate me, love bomb me, and had the Christian title as well. And when I was in church, I was taught to basically be loyal, obedient to men, submissive to men, serve men, be pure, and that once you do have sex, you must get married. And then knowing that if you do get married, you stay in it until until the end. And so all of these things were instilled in me. And as my marriage began to fall apart and things began to happen, I began to look back at how I was raised and what the church was teaching me. And there were a lot of good things about it, but I began to resent some things because I don't believe you need to get married because you have sex, or you've had a weak moment, or you get pregnant. I do not see that is the reason that you do that.
I 100% agree with that. And I know that's probably going to be a really tough um, thing for many people of faith to absorb and go, oh, okay. But unless you walk through an extremely painful marriage, you will understand. So I would like to reiterate that unless you specifically have walked through a very painful marriage, you have no idea what that person's walking through. And, I always thought it's, you need to get married if you have sex with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. I 100% agree with that. And, you know, I don't really blame the church. I think
No.
it's just it's rooted from day one.
Mm-hmm.
I've said it before, there's nothing more beautiful than a marriage because even Christ references the church as his bride. But I think Dina said this, I think in our last podcast, and that was, or one of our most previous podcasts, and that was God can't enter into a covenant if righteousness isn't there from both. He just cannot. And I know that may be hard, and I know that not everybody's going to agree with us, and I'm okay with that. Um, so as we are in this dating world again, Tiffany, what has been what is some of the things that we've done? I know we've learned a lot about personality disorders, narcissism, what love bombing is, which now if I was talking to a church, you need to teach your congregation these things, especially the young, the ones that are getting ready to enter the dating world. Go ahead and share what you recently experienced in your dating. And this has been over the board, like with other people and even my own experience. So it just is like, this is crazy. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to also say that it's very important as we're doing this conversation is we're trying to reach other women and men to understand what you should be looking for when you are dating, and that you need to be able to love yourself, trust yourself, to have that intuition to quickly get out if you see certain signs. And as I began to heal after my divorce, I began counseling and learning what to look for and how to trust myself again, and how to trust my intuition, how to love myself, and what I really wanted. And I wish I would have known what I know now at 14 when I began dating. I felt like now I look at it and go, wow, that's just reckless, to go out there and not know these tools, because you will end up more than likely in a situation. And also, just want to mention that healing your inner child and understanding why you're looking for love, and most importantly, to love yourself first. And that comes before a relationship. And then as I'm out in the dating world, my first relationship outside the dating world, outside of divorce, was I decided I didn't want to date the label of a Christian. And so I thought, I'm going to try something different, because that didn't seem to work. Not that I was going to change somebody, but I thought, well, maybe they've never heard of Christ, and maybe we could start fresh, and they wouldn't have that influence of their already preconceived ideas of God and Jesus. And I was just trying something new. And that person I dated for 4 months, wonderful, wonderful person, taught me actually what I should be expecting from a relationship. One of the most kindest, most giving, kind, loving person. And he didn't know God. He was actually an atheist. He said he had learned about God as a child and he turned from God. And he had lost his wife. And I said, so what do you believe? And we had a very respectful conversation. And after, having a conversation with him, he was just like, no, I'm not going to believe in God. And so we both agreed that this wasn't going to be a relationship we could continue. And we're still friends. I still set the standard of how he treated me genuinely and kindly. everything was green flags with him. And yeah, he's just a great person. And then other dates that I've been on, just getting myself out there, having faith in God that he's going to bring me someone, and the label of Christian. And boy, that's been interesting. And because I have the tools, I can quickly recognize within 15 minutes to maybe an hour, I'll give them an hour, looking for those red flags, looking for green flags. And I'm quickly learning that the label of Christian doesn't always match their behaviors. And it's really
Tiffany, what
important.
would those flags be? Tell us some of those. I know that you went on a date the other day, and I mean, I think you had 15 minutes before you had him pegged. So I'm curious, like since I'm not in the dating world, I want to know, like, what are some of the red flags that you can find early on and just save yourself from going down another road? Because, they do say that you are more likely to marry a second narcissist or toxic person than less likely if you've been in a relationship with them before, which is terrifying because you would think after you've been in one, you have all those signs nailed down, but they change like a dang chameleon, right?
Mhm.
So tell us out there, what are you looking at?
So just from this last date that I went on, I'll kind of share a few things that, I find funny now because I can recognize it and I can move on and go, well, that's just not going to work. How they treat the staff, the wait staff. We went to coffee, then we went to a nice dinner, and he was horrible. And the staff were actually responding and reacting to him. It was very embarrassing.
What did he do? Did he just say something rude, or what did he do?
Let's go back to, he's a CEO of a huge company. So he's used to telling people what to do and people serve him. So he was treating them as if, you will serve me and I will treat you how I want and you will listen to me. And, like he left the coffee cups on the table and said, yeah, here you go. And told them to come throw them away. Just he ordered for me, and I was like, what?
Oh, hell no.
He took the most comfortable seat. These sound like petty little things, but they're big red flags. And let's see.
I agree. Those are actually really.
Yeah. And then he started talking about the dating world. And so I just started asking some questions like, oh, what ages do you have on your dating profile of who you're searching for? To me, that's a red flag if you're looking for somebody way younger than you or way older. Either way. And he was, he's 49 and he was looking in the 30s to the 40s. And I found that odd. And then he started saying all kinds of things that he's been focusing only on Christian dating sites, started showing me some things, and then started criticizing and judging some of the Christian girls because he goes, I bet most of these girls are 40-year-old virgins. Like, come on, you can love God, but you still got to give it up, and saying things like that. And then asking questions like, have you gone wild after your divorce? And it was like, no. It was just so many odd things that he kept saying to me. And I was like, okay.
I couldn't help but laugh because I was watching Dina's face. I could not help it. That was funny.
The ordering for you, I think, is what really pinched me.
You should have seen my face. I was trying not to react. I was like, huh, okay. No.
And then asking if you went wild, I could see if you showed up looking like a prostitute. I could totally get that. Like, did you go wild after your divorce? Like maybe in a compassionate way, but you don't dress like that. So he's just feeling to see if you're like one of those non-40-year-old virgins.
Mm-hmm. And then I said, okay, so he was from out of town, not too far. And I said, okay, so all right, you're heading home. He's like, no, I'm getting a hotel. What? No. kind of,
Wah, wah, wah.
but
Tiffany, these are good. These are really good flags. These are really good.
Yeah. I mean, I went on a Christian dating site after probably about 8 years after my first divorce. I think I was kind of slow getting back in the dating world. And that's how I met Rex. And this time around, I'm like, I ain't using no Christian dating website because if they're gonna pray, I am amazed how many people prey on Christian people of faith. And I think it's because we are so forgiving. We're such like what the world would say empaths, and God can change everyone, which I 100% agree, but they have to be willing to change. And so we think because they have all the right, you know, things to say, they know how to kind of get through the door, in these conversations that, it's like, yeah, we got to start watching these signs. Like we need to watch them in our place of worship. And I think churches should get mad. They should get mad that these people are coming in and praying on our people in our congregation, and they are doing it so well. And then
well,
they go ahead.
he called himself a Jesus follower, which I loved besides the label of Christian. So I thought, well, maybe, he's telling me that he reads the Bible. My sister's like, oh, wow, he seems like he was just really out there and really showed his red flags. And I said, no, if I didn't know and I didn't do the work to heal and to understand this, I would have fell for it because he has this whole company where he helps people and he builds homes for people. And he has this whole mission that he does for God, of service for people. I mean, I fell in love right away with that thought of you're that much of a giving person. And so that I loved. And I thought if I didn't know all the rest, I would have kept going and saw him more often and, hopefully would have figured it out later, but I'm not sure.
And yeah, those are definitely worthy red flags. So, speaking of our involvement, and Dina, I hope it's okay if I say this, but Dina, like me and Tiffany, went through a phase that we didn't know if we wanted to date Christians or people that were actively involved in church.
Oh, you are more than welcome to say that. Absolutely.
I'm
Well,
so
when you come
glad.
from that environment, when you come from that environment of, somebody that's, and disclaimer, you guys, we are not trying to say that all people who say they're Christians are bad or all people who say they go to church are bad. We're not saying that at all. I think what we're saying is, unfortunately, this is a really great little hiding place, to build this little biblical facade to make you think that this person has all the qualities and traits that you want in a good person, But yeah, to be completely honest, when I ended my marriage with Rex for the 26 years I was with him, and it was a constant facade. Everybody who knew him outside of our tiny circle thought he was this wonderful Christian man because he was so good at acting. It was like you couldn't have paid an actor to do a better job. And after that, I said, I do not want a Christian. I do not. And I literally even prayed this to God, to the Christian God right there. I was like, I do not want a Christian. I want a good man. A good man that even if he quote unquote backslid, which I'm not even sure I believe in backsliding anymore, but even if he quote unquote backslid, he now wouldn't be a horrible monster. He would still just be a good person because he just is a good person. And you know what? That's exactly what I got. I got exactly what I asked for. And did he eventually develop a faith in God? He did. He did. But even if he never would have, that would have not been a good thing, truly, because, our faith and what we believe in our very core of our hearts wouldn't have matched. But he was still such a good man and still is to this day. So, yes, am I trying to say, you should go out and try to find someone who doesn't believe in God? No, not necessarily. But I think Tiffany has a great point, and my point too. And I think the biggest point to take away from this is don't trash anybody who says they have a religion or a faith, but look deeper at their character. Who are they as a person? With church, without church, with scripture, without all the good deeds that they're hailing from the rooftops that they're doing. Who are they really? What do they do behind closed doors? And one of my first signs from him was we were about to go on a date, and he had a teenage daughter, and we were pulling out of the house because we're leaving on our date, and his daughter was mad at him. They'd gotten in a little tiff and she was upset. And so she got in the car and took off, and he said, listen, if you don't mind, can I please just go and get my daughter? I know where she's going. Can I just go and get her and talk to her? I don't want to leave for the day with her being upset. And the thing is, she had been a little, teenager, and she deserved him getting on her. This wasn't like he was mean or anything, but we literally went and found her, and he crawled in the car and sat and talked to her and said, I want you to know I love you, and I want to make sure you're okay, and gave her a big hug. And of course, now you know what I'm doing, right? I'm like, we were dating at that point, maybe 3 weeks. And in my mind, I'm like ring shopping. I'm like, this is it, man. You are mine. And that's that. So
That's really cute, Dina. And speaking of that, I think I've been told several times, especially after my second divorce, well, you shouldn't date a Christian. So here I'm going to really dive into something here. And that is, I need people from the church to hear this because we need to make a change. So what does that change need to look like is my question. And I think the three of us are a good start. I'm sure there's lots of other people that are probably like psychologically more advanced than us. But the point is, we have people leaving the church because of this stuff.
Yep.
We are losing people left and right who have no desire to get to know Christians.
Yep.
They have no desire to date Christians. And I don't think it's because they are turning away from God. I think it's because people of God have turned from them.
Oh,
and
wow.
they have,
Preach it, Lizzie.
yeah. And so I kind of want to now focus on kind of get feedback. How can we encourage churches to change this? What steps should they take? How do
I
they
have a
work with
quick
their
one.
young one? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry. I was supposed to hold up my finger and wait for you to stop, not hold up my finger and interrupt you. I now realize that.
it's kind of like
Right.
turning on the blinker as you're making your turn. No,
Exactly. Right. Too late. Anyway, sorry. No, sorry. I was just dying to say this, but let me tell you something. Here's one thing that I think all three of us could totally get on board and agree with. When the church supports the abuser, not the abused, okay, that is also turning people away, because people often equate the church with God. Now, they shouldn't, right? Because the church is just made of people who are flawed. We should not equate the church with God. But generally, when people turn away from the church, unless they're mature enough and healthy enough to go to a better church, they will also turn away from God because they will feel like they were hurt by God. And I've had multiple experiences, sadly, one of them where somebody, young teenage boys were being molested in the church, and the church wanted to support the molester because the molester had been with them for years and they loved him. And he was one of those helpers, like you're talking about, Tiffany, helping people when their house burned down, standing up for the church and asking for everybody to donate for all these families. He was doing it constantly. People loved him. And even though it was an open shut proven case in court, they didn't want to abide by the law and him stay away. So he got to go to the sister church right down the street where the friends were pastors. And they even came to the courtroom and supported him. Open shut case, molested 15-year-old boys. They came in, a whole row of church people. Now, there was also a row of people that were supporting the victim and the victim's family. But the appalling part was seeing the churches come and support the abuser. And then again, you and I have talked, Lizzie, on our podcast about how, you go in to talk to somebody in the church, you're talking to people in authority, you're talking to pastors, you're telling them what's going on. And, the big actor over here is weeping and sobbing, and he's the one that has been doing all the abuse, but he's sobbing and weeping and making this big performance. And so they get supported. they get supported. And I think that's a big one. Now I'll shut up.
No, I loved it. And I agree. I think that has been part of the problem is that the abused ended up being treated as supposedly the person that was doing all of this because people in the church don't see what's going on in the home. And another thing, I was raised, as a PK, pastor's kids family, a lot of times my mother would say, well, we just say unless they cheated on you or they physically abused you or they leave you, divorce isn't an option because we don't want people to think that the divorce is okay. I'm going to here debunk that, and I'll tell you why. Because most of the people in these situations that are involved in church, the innocent, the victims, they are the ones bending over backwards to try to make that marriage work, to try to make a home for their children, for their spouse, because they honor the whole, the imagery of, a marriage. And so when they're the ones, when they're at the breaking point and they can't take it no more, it's okay. They need to leave, right? So here we are now getting back to what are some things that we could encourage churches or people of faith, or even not of faith of this, but how do we protect the innocent from the wolf in sheep's clothing? What are some things you guys would encourage?
I definitely would encourage educating the mentors, the older crowd to help the younger crowd. But also what I see about, with my experience too with abusers is they put on a good show. They smear your name before anything ever happens because they know that you're finding out and you're finding your voice. And a lot of people want to believe the abuser because they come off as innocent, the victim, and the victim is blindsided, confused, lost, and reacting. So you look like you're doing something to cause this person to behave this way. I still am looking for a Christian, but I'm looking for someone that follows God, follows the Bible, genuine, kind, good person that loves God. I'm not looking for a perfect person, but now that I know what I know, I want to prevent this from happening to any other person. It's devastating. It's destruction, destroys families. I'm in the business now of breaking generational curses, and I'm learning about that and how I can do that. And I really want the younger generation to know and understand before you commit to someone legally in a contract, this is something that you need to understand and know the person you're marrying, because a lot of times the abuser will not show who they are until they have married you. That is their end goal, is to marry you. And once you're married legally, and what I went through was a lot of financial abuse while married, and I didn't even understand it. And then it's called abuse after you file divorce. It's abuse during the fight. You're in a war, and they will use up all your money to destroy you even after you file. And I'm at a point in my life that I want to help people prevent that. I talk to many people throughout the day. Anyone, I have grandchildren now. I'm hoping that I can do better with them and show them. And I'm not sure I will ever sign a contract of marriage again. I will sign a contract to prevent my assets if someone moves in with me, because I'm in the state of California and I have to protect, certain laws that are in place if you live together for a certain amount of years. But signing a contract legally with someone for the government to decide whether I can get divorced or not and how much money it could end up costing is not worth it to me anymore.
So I have a question. Okay, because we always, in the Bible it talks about, the older wise people will raise up the younger, right? And the wisdom and all of that. So when you say educate, because my Christianese mind thinks Bible stuff, what else do you think that those of us who have journeyed through this or even not, what kind of things can they educate the younger crowds of? What besides the Bible can we do to bring awareness of the types of people out there?
There are just so many. I mean, I could write a list I of things that you need to look for, you need to understand of what the signs are. There are so many people that are master manipulators and actors, like you've mentioned, and they're really good. They're really, really good. And so educating as many people in the church on how to teach these principles and what to look for, what are the signs. Also having that mentoring with the younger generation and showing them. I think a lot of the older generation don't even know, or I could even go to say there are a lot of people that are married that are unhappy and are still living in abusive situations. And some of them are not aware how abusive it is. So when I got out of my abusive relationship, I had no idea how bad it was. I knew it was bad, but once you're out of it and you're out of the fog, and so educating so many people that are older, younger, raising them up to understand this, what to look for, to respect themselves, love themselves, heal their inner child. So important.
Oh, so agree. And I think learning for churches, I think it's really hard to bring these terminologies in:
Mhm.
narcissism, personality disorder, love bombing, financial abuse. I mean, physical abuse is one we talked about a lot, but there was a lot that just was not unraveled. And a lot of it was not unraveled till these people are in these types of marriages. And some of them, as I said before, will stay in for decades because they don't know any different. And they made that commitment to somebody, but their whole life has been fraught with deep, dark turmoil and thinking, what's that one thing I can do that can change this? What's that one prayer? And I totally think that there are some marriages you cannot pray enough for. You can't go to enough marriage counseling. You can't go to enough conventions. Dina and I have mentioned that before. So that is why we wanted to do this, because we want to make you all aware. If we learn terminology, we learn what they mean, we learn what they look like. And instead of telling someone to take it slow, we say, you need to take time to watch these types of behavior. Who do they surround themselves with? How do they react to other people on a daily basis, not in a just, short relationship? And I know Dina said this before, and I agree. Do not do long distance dating, because you do not have the opportunity to watch them. You do not have the opportunity to see how they are on a day-to-day basis, because that is when the red flags will start to come up, not in a not in a long distance relationship. Now, I'm not going to say what it should look like. If you guys decide you really want to make something work, that's between you and God. But I will say that long distance is not the way to find out if someone has these types of red flags. Dina, do you have anything that you would like to encourage the church as far as with your journey and everything else, or people in the church to watch
Yeah.
out for or educate?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love this topic, and I've got several, but I think the one that really jumps out to me that I felt and experienced was I know that churches are all about love. And I know, just like in a toxic relationship with a spouse or a significant other, that love can get really blurry. So, in other words, with all three of us having toxic relationships and experiencing abuse, at what point are you loving them, right? Loving them to, to see your great character and your countenance, and loving them to make them want to turn and placing the hot coals in their head, etc. And at what point are you enabling their behavior to where you are weak and you are allowing this to occur? And that's something I want to say as far as churches go. What I noticed, and I've told you guys this before, I had a very broken filter. I picked some very bad churches, but they were very flourishing churches in the community. So it wasn't just me. It's not like I went to little tiny churches. I went to the big ones with the big choirs and all the things for the kids to do and all the things, that everybody in the community would want. Those are the churches that I chose. And, it seemed like the churches that I would choose, their love excuse was so large that, once again, it was the abusers, it was the people in the church that were toxic, that were living double lives, even some of the leadership in the church. I mean, I know I'm not the only one that has heard a million horror stories of a youth pastor being inappropriate, with one of the kids, or a pastor having one affair or multiple affairs. On and on these stories go. I mean, I was dumbfounded in hearing a lot of these things in some of the churches that I attended. And when I would approach the pastors and say, what is going on here? There would be this, well, we need to love everybody. They need God too. Matter of fact, they need God worse. They need God. So we can't just, kick them out? Yeah, yes, kick them out. Because people that are in these churches that are living a double life, that are causing chaos, and the leaders are sweeping it under the rug. And again, I know this has been in the news. There's now been Netflix series going on about these kinds of behaviors in some of these really big churches. It's terrible, really, because it makes it look like every church does this, and not every church does. There's so many good ones and so many more good ones than bad ones. But there's a theme here. When there is garbage going on under your nose and you're a church leader, you need to take care of it. Okay. Jesus knocked over tables and used whips. He called people evil, vile snakes and pretty mean, nasty things. He wasn't all love and googie and like hug you for every time you're a bad person. He called people out on their crap. He called it out with no uncertain terms. And you know why? Because that's another form of love. That's tough love. That's, you know what? You might have problems. We care about that. We don't want you to have problems, but you're going to go deal with your problems. And you're not going to be here in leadership while you're dealing with them. So toxic people create toxic environments, and they prey on people, innocent people. And the churches with the leadership that turns a blind eye have so many toxic people and so many victims. And I think that's one of the saddest things I've ever seen, is just claiming that God wants them to be loved. And if you get abused, well, we don't call that abuse.
Yeah, it's kind of like you said, they sweep it, they quiet. He's forgiven. He's come and asked, forgiveness to God, people in the congregation, but that's sometimes not enough. And I know it must grieve God.
Or they send them to another church. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, go to this church down the street. That way you're not here. We did the right thing. We washed our hands of you, but are they going to go be a leader there too?
Or they start another church.
Oh, there you go.
Mm-hmm. And I was very involved in church. I was in the choir. I was in large churches that were televised. I was in, large churches in town. And I saw everything that you're saying. But overall, yes, church is there for love, direction, teaching about God. And we all three love God. We love what the church can do. We just know now that there's more that we could add to that.
Well, and I think what we know too, Tiffany, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's just a lot of unhealthy behavior, and we blame it on the Bible. You know, we enable things that should never be enabled. You know, we look away from things that should never be looked away from. And, you know, we neglect to teach our leaders. We neglect to raise them up to understand, especially youth group leaders, singles, train them up to understand what toxicity and abuse and narcissism and manipulation and gaslighting look like. Teach them so that they can teach their groups, their people, their teenagers, their singles. Give them the tools to teach them.
Amen. You said it perfectly. Because when I was growing up, they were doing their best to teach me what they could about relationships. Make a list of the man that you want. You look for a Christian. You know, all these things, but that was missing.
Yeah, and what is it? What is a Christian really? Like, are we in the churches? I hope anybody who's listening that has any kind of church leadership, please share this with your congregations. If we're telling our young men and women to look for a Christian to marry, how are we defining that? What does a Christian really look like? Because just because they go to church and read the Bible and all those things, who are they really? What are they looking for? Are we talking fruit of the Spirit here? Kindness, love, long suffering, patience? Because if they truly are a believer and they truly do know how to love, they will love whoever's in their life more than they love themselves. Because, you know, my ex had a measure of love. He did kind things for me and nice things for me. And I feel like in a way he loved me, but he loved himself first. So as long as he was happy, I could get some of the leftover, but it was always him first. If money came in out of nowhere, because we were always so broke, guess who got the TV? Guess who got the nice stuff? Guess who got taken care of? Him. Okay. I was okay to be self-sacrificing because that was just my nature. I wanted him to have nice things. I wanted him to, but you know, someone who loves somebody, they can't go and serve themselves and feel good about it. So what are we really teaching our people? How are we educating them on what love really is and what Christianity really is? Are we really teaching them boundaries, hard boundaries of black and white, right and wrong? Yes, this is okay. No, this isn't. I mean, I am all for bringing people in, like Calvary Chapel when they let all the hippies start coming in. Wonderful. The Jesus Revolution movie, wonderful. Gave me goosebumps, tears. I think those are the kinds of people you need to bring in, people that are just looking and lost.
I don't know why, but I just thought of this. I have been thinking about always, because I was the nice girl. And when you brought up boundaries, I really want these girls to know that you can have boundaries and still be this wonderful, great person. You know?
So it's
Even more
definitely,
beautiful.
yeah, and it's definitely learning what those boundaries look like. I think is the big key.
I never had boundaries.
And I'm sure if I want to say it the worldly way, I think a lot of people of faith are a lot of empaths too. So that's why we tend to attract those types of personalities, the narcissists, the other personality disorders. And that's where the problem comes in. So I think it's learning to train up. They say train up the way of a child, and when they're older, they will not depart from it. Well, I think all of these other things need to come into play because what we're doing is we're instilling some wisdom into them. And I would love to close the gap of abuse. I would love to close the gap of divorce and the pain and the trauma that goes with it. And I think by doing that, we need to educate, educate, educate. And it's not words that we like to say in the church sometimes on some of the stuff we want to educate on.
Yeah. And churches have a wonderful opportunity because every week they have a huge audience. They have a huge audience of diverse people that need to hear a message of truth, you know, and what's good behavior. Even people that are already married, they need to hear, well, what does it look like when a spouse is truly walking the walk. What does that really look like? What does it look like when they're not? They need to understand the difference. You know, those things need to be taught, and they need to be taught often, and they need to be taught in their completion, because love has ushy gushy, forgiveness, hugs, loves, loves, loves. And love also has, no, you absolutely will not do that. You absolutely will not treat me that way. You absolutely not treat the children that way. And if you don't grow up and stop, then we're done here.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like the church let me down. I feel like they did so many wonderful, great things, led me on such a good path, except choosing the right partner based on all of those other things. And I didn't know to look for it, and I wasn't equipped. And
Well
that was,
said.
and
Yeah.
that's why I was so hurt by the church. And I felt like this whole decision of marrying this person, and I was trusting the church. I was trusting their judgment. I was trusting what they said. And if I followed this, I would find the good person, my soulmate. And to end up, that didn't happen. And to realizing there were a lot of things I didn't know, all that terminology, all the signs to look for, how to have boundaries. And I really felt me being so involved in the church, going every Sunday, going every Wednesday, Bible study, mission trips, all of these things, mentoring, and they lacked that information, which was so important for me to know to make a better decision. And instead, my life went a different path, and a lot of destruction happened on that one decision. And when everything came to an end, finally, everything was said and done, settled, I couldn't help but cry and go, one decision led to all of this destruction.
Yeah.
And how
Yeah.
this
There you go.
and avoided. If I would have known this information, and because so many people go to church, this is the church's opportunity to help so many people not make these mistakes, know the signs, so that they do not have to walk this path and feel this. And you can also say, well, this is God's plan for your life, yes, but also I wouldn't have made that choice. I was tricked, and I would have known this. If I would have known, I would have never got married to that person. Instead, I would have kept looking. And
Well said, Tiffany.
I want other men and women to never have to experience that.
I think
Well
that's
said.
really well said. And I would say that I would also like to emphasize, just like I'm very passionate, if a church does not do a background check for people working or volunteering in a nursery or middle school or high school groups, I will not attend that church. And I think also we can incorporate having background checks on your fiancés. And I mean, that's just one step, right? But it's one of many to protect yourself and not taking the word of anybody. And there's, I think Dean and I are still looking for some really great background check places, but I would say if we incorporate that, like if pastors even use that when they do premarital counseling, saying need to do a background check before I even marry you. And I'm not going to say that because a lot of us get married young. So obviously there's not a lot, but that's still one step of many that we can take to protect the men and women in our places of worship. Wow.
Love it. Yeah. Love it.
Anything else?
Nope. I think we said a lot.
We said a lot, and I think we had a lot of passion. And I hope that
one more quick thing. You know me,
Yes.
Sorry, Lizzie. One more quick thing. I also want to say that, and I know you guys will probably know this too, that do you remember going through these awful relationships and you were so miserable? And what books were you all reading? how to be a better wife, how to be a more Christian wife, how to pray for your husband, right? How to let him do all this stuff
Yes.
and just pray it away. Like, I mean, right? Like, that's another thing. We've
Just
got some
keep
good
praying.
books now. What's
Yeah,
that?
just keep praying. They're going to change. It'll get better.
Yes,
It's
yes, yes.
me.
And
I'm the
yes,
problem. It's me. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, that's our role, right? Our role is to pray them back into being nice to us and pray them back into doing the right thing. And anyway, I just had to say that. That was just a tiny pet peeve, but I just had to say that because I know that, thank God, in this generation things are changing and people are actually coming out with more healthy books and recognizing a lot of these behaviors. But I think even more from a faith-based perspective, there needs to be a lot of, okay, yeah, you pray for everybody in your life, of course. But when this stuff starts happening, you do more than pray, because I even knew people, this is terrible, but I even knew people that, I mean, I had a friend, and the 18-year-old daughter and I became close because she was babysitting for me. And she confided in me that her dad, who her mom and dad were children's pastors, her dad was making her shower with the curtain open and doing awful things. And like, they were in a very big, prosperous church. And when I went to the pastor, he already knew about it. He already knew about it. He just said, we keep asking the daughter, because he kind of touches her inappropriately even in church. So we keep asking the daughter, and she doesn't want to confess. So anyway, sorry, rant over. But I'm just saying, like, these are things that it seems like they can't happen in the workplace anymore. There's so many laws and rules that have gone into protecting people outside the church, and books and awareness and teaching and education. You gotta get inside the church.
I think
All
that's
right.
a really good point to close on, that people on the outside of the church are becoming so aware of these behaviors. What happens if we do bring it in? Imagine the awareness believers or people of faith would have moving forward. We can't just let them on the outside do it anymore. We have to bring
Yeah.
it in.
We need strong boundaries. We need to protect our people. They're vulnerable. They're innocent. They're going there trusting God. They're giving their whole heart to God, that He'll protect them and do right by them. And they're trusting the church to be the ambassador of that.
Yeah.
And this same young girl I was talking about, her mom and her would pray together every single night that her dad would stop touching her. This stuff happened. This stuff happens. That's where, like, we have to put in strong boundaries. I'm not saying prayer is not powerful. It is, but it has its place. And kicking somebody in the shins has its other place. Kicking them in the other spots has even a bigger place sometimes. We've
Yeah.
got to do our part.
Yes, 100%. I've been saying that just like what you guys have been saying. Background checks in the church, 100%. I didn't even put my own children when they were young in the nurseries in the church. I waited till they were older when they could talk and they could explain things to me just in case, because there were no background checks.
Yeah. I know a lot of churches have come a long way in that, and I'm so thankful for it. I think that is impactful, because the enemy is a roaring lion seeking who they may devour. And I think, what adjectives and verbs are in that particular Bible verse? That it is, like, to me, that's very descriptive. And I think we really need to take heart to that. Doesn't mean that we have to look at everybody going, oh, is they a wolf in sheep's clothing or not? Or we don't need to be going, questioning everything of everybody. But I think we do need to seek more wisdom to protect others, so that we don't continue to have people walking away from the faith because of the deep wounds, the deep pain, because they felt like the people that should have been there were not. So, oh my goodness, ladies, I enjoyed this conversation. It was a hurt, feel good kind of conversation to have. And Tiffany, I just am so thankful you joined us today, because I could not think of a better person right now to have this conversation with. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank
And
you. I love coming on here and having these chats with you guys.
oh,
Awesome.
it is beautiful. And if you guys ever want to hear our other podcasts, you can find us under the Matadoras on all the other platforms. We also have a Facebook page, Women of Faith Breaking Free from Toxic Relationships. We would love for you to follow there. And also, we will have Instagram, TikTok. We're building all of that. And you may find us on our website, thematadors.com, and you can reach us through that because we would love to hear from you. And know that each one of you, we care deeply about each one of you, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.